My name is Carl Spalding. I'm going to be looking after your questions around BIM 360 and what the platform does, what it enables. We have shared a lot of blogs that have been written by the panelists, so that answers some of those some of those kind of general questions. But again, I'm quite happy to cover some of those. For example, Autodesk have made the BIM 360 platform, BIM 360 Docs and Design available as a free offering for a limited period up until the end of May. But I'll talk to some of the questions that were received around what that means and how people can access it. So that's me. I'll talk about BIM 360 and I'll hand you over to Billy to introduce himself and then over to Alan, who will introduce himself as well.
Hi, afternoon everyone. So I'm Billy Sherrard. I'm the Autodesk product manager for Excitec. My role basically entails working all things Autodesk, and in this context, I'll be talking through the Autodesk licensing and how you can utilize some of your subscription benefits and how you can work towards, working from home on the licensing terms. Depends really what licensing mix you have. Single user, multi-user, the setup's slightly different. But yeah, happy to answer any questions on, what's compliant, what's accessible, what's available. I'll pass over to Alan.
Thanks, Billy. Hi, everyone. Alan Stone. I head up the IT Solutions Business Unit at Excitec. I'm here to talk to you about remote working from an infrastructure point of view. So some of the limitations you might be finding with VPN and remote desktop, some of the best practices, what other software is available to us today to help you with that. Any questions IT related, please use the chat box, ask them, and we'll do our best to answer them today for you. I'll pass you back to Cole.
Yeah, so thank you very much, guys. So yeah, we've obviously this is a really challenging time for a lot of organizations trying to get up and running from home, get people to work from home. So you've got lots of options available to you. We've looked at several kind of quick start methods where we've produced something around using VPNs or remote desktop, and equally if you've got people at home that are using Revit or AutoCAD as a platform, then they're able to use that to connect to potentially a cloud-based solution like BIM 360, where they can interact with the their project models from there. So depending on your scenario, we've got lots of questions that have come in around different things. So I'm going to kickstart and just talk around some of this early access program that Autodesk have introduced for BIM 360 Docs and BIM 360 Design. I'm going to talk to Docs first to just, I think, let's get that, that kind of platform out the way first, so we can understand what that enables, and then we'll talk around Design as an option for your Revit-based workforce or designers to work remotely. So if I talk around BIM 360 Docs quickly, some of the questions we're getting is, what is this early access program and how do I take advantage of it? Well, if you sign up to a BIM 360 Docs trial currently, Docs or Design trial for that matter, basically Autodesk have extended what was a 30-day trial over to the end of May. So 31st of May is when that extended period is currently. They may review it, but that's what the timeline is at the moment. So what does that mean? It means basically that you can enable your project teams, people not necessarily doing design work, but also the extended stakeholder teams, to access project-related data from a cloud or from a cloud using a browser. So that allows you to view model files with 2D drawings, PDFs, that sort of stuff, but in the cloud. So using a browser, don't need a powerful machine to do that. And that makes it really kind of an easy way for the design teams to interact with, or the extended project teams to interact with project data. That's redlining it. So if you're doing markups, raising issues, that sort of stuff, that's what that platform will enable. Without needing to use any desktop software. They can do that all from a browser. Some of the other capabilities are, things like doing change of views. So you'll be able to have a look at things which have changed from a previous version. So if you get multiple versions updated, you'll be able to see any changes that happen to that. So that's that kind of workflow. To sign up for a trial, you just need your administrator to go to the BIM 360 site. We will publish the link on this chat, where they can sign up for a trial and then invite your other teams to that. There are some restrictions. If you've signed up to a trial before, you're not going to be able to sign up again. So someone else might need to do that. But that's what you can do currently with BIM 360 Docs. So BIM 360 Design, same principle as I've explained earlier. Sign up for a trial, get your administrator to do so. And then what that enables is your Revit-based workforce, providing they're using Revit 2018.3 and later, to do a Revit work sharing, continue with their Revit work sharing, but do that remotely. The key thing there is that they do need to have a machine at home or where they're working from that runs Revit. So that's going to be your big criteria there. If they are using a VPN to connect to a remote desktop in the office, setting up a BIM 360 cloud platform is going to be a little bit counterproductive because you're using up far too much bandwidth from the local office. So just something to think about. So that's just a quick introduction from that. If I hand over to some of the other guys, so Billy, if you can talk to some of the home use license and what people can do with that, that'll be great.
Of course, yeah. So from an Autodesk licensing perspective, there's obviously two key scenarios here: single user licensing and multi-user licensing. So if we focus on the single user side of things, first of all, simply, it is very simple. All you need to do really is, once you've assigned your license to your user, as you would have done anyway, it'll be visible, the license will be visible in their Autodesk account. Once they're at home, they can download the software onto their workstation at home. Just by logging into their account, download links will be available and all the access if they need it. If it's email sign on, they can just sign in. So with regards to using it at home, and that's fully compliant. I mean, subscription licenses are entitled to up to 3 installs. They shouldn't be held at the same location. But of course, if your workstation's in the office, you can install it at home. And again, a portable device should need be. So for each user, they can do it. Now, it doesn't give you 3 concurrent uses. It's just for that one user. So that one user can have it installed up to 3 devices. So assign it as you usually would. They can install and access software at home. Simple. Multi-user is slightly different, obviously, as the license server will be taking the license when they boot it up. You've got a couple of options here. So option 1 is your users can log into your network, check out a license for a predetermined set of time. Licenses generally set up 30 days as default, I believe, but you can create an options file that will enable longer use once you've checked out a multi-user license. The alternative to that is request a home use license. You can do this via your Autodesk account. So your contract administrator, software coordinator can log into their account and basically request a home use serial number. It'll basically enable your users to install the application and run it essentially as a single user. That's kind of how it works, but run it indefinitely. Well, it's a 12-month license once you've checked it out in this way. But essentially, they can work from home under that basis. Your usage should never exceed your number of licenses. So if you've got 10 licenses, for example, you shouldn't have any more than 10 people using the license at any given moment. And that's true of any licensing. You can access a multi-user license via a VPN. Again, depending on how consistent that runs, and you may lose connection, the license may be returned, and that particular user may have difficulty getting back in. So I'd always recommend either checking out a license and setting an options file to determine how long that's stored for, or indeed requesting a home use license, usually my go-to. Again, just a reminder before I hand over to Alan, any questions you guys have got on, again, BIM 360, Autodesk licensing, or indeed IT, do put them in the chat box. Yeah, let's keep them coming. So, Alan, I'll hand over to you.
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, so I think the majority of workplaces now are using VPN today to support that remote working. Some of the limitations with VPN, especially with using Autodesk Revit, and there's a question is speed. Now, the speed is not the actual connections, it's the latency on those connections between A to B, your home to head office. Revit's not designed to work across wide area networks. That's why we have solutions such as BIM 360 or the old traditional Revit server. And you will struggle if you're not using the workstation in the office. You're trying to use Revit across a VPN. You are going to struggle with connectivity issues, especially with work sharing on multiple models. Now, some of the people how they're overcoming that today. They're using a VPN connection and actually running the resources still on the workstation in head office. So they're using protocols such as remote desktop, team viewer, VNC, Splashtop, etc. to do that. Now, the limitations of that is again, it's going to be bandwidth. You may have several users all accessing the VPN at any one time, running those remote protocols. Bandwidth is going to be an issue. I live in a quite a built-up area, but my connection has been terrible over the last few days because the whole of the estate is on the internet. We're using WebEx, we're using YouTube today, so bandwidth is an issue. Bandwidth will be an issue, and how we limit the bandwidth going into head office. We need to start looking at things like BIM 360 for that. However, that said, a lot of people, it's not applicable using BIM 360. So what are the best practices for using remote desktop over a VPN? How do we limit what other traffic is going down there? So if we're using Outlook locally and a remote desktop and a VPN, let's try and turn off some of those other services. So we're freeing up that bandwidth on your local connection and also the head office connection. We've got a question here, Cole, I think about particularly having an issue with work sharing over a VPN, and how do we move it to BIM 360, and what are the risks with the data? So did you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Alan. So yeah, trying to use Revit work sharing over a VPN is going to struggle. Certainly, if you're doing the work sharing, because what happens is your Revit model is being transferred to the local machine and then back again. Over that first the VPN, so it's your user's connection to the office and then to your server through that VPN. So there's the upload and download speed at the other end, and then back again. So as I was saying around latency, you're going to start to struggle. So when you've got multiple people doing that on the same model, it is going to really have an impact, because every time someone saves back to central, it's going to stop the other teams. It's going to have an impact on the other designers who are working on that model. So how that works in a BIM 360 world, like I said, the key thing here is that providing the user has a machine at home or where they are that can run Revit, then the best practice there would be to host that model in BIM 360. And the reason for that is, similarly to when you would open the model over a VPN, you will get that, excuse me, the first time you open that model, it kind of caches it locally. But every time your team syncs with Central after that, it's just sending the changes that have been made. But doing that doesn't impact anyone else that's working on that work shared model. So, hosting your model in BIM 360 is the best practice with a work share, Revit work sharing, and then to retrieve that model, because the question is, what are the risks of that data? Firstly, it's encrypted for everyone else in the world except the people that have access to it, which is basically just you and your team. So from that point of view, it's very secure. In terms of being able to retrieve it, it's just a download. You just download the file again, and you've got it. All the data that's hosted in BIM 360 is very accessible. So you can just drag and drop it back into your local machine. There's an option to select everything and download it, so you can get and retrieve all of your data relatively easily. So hopefully that answers the question for Jason. I just want to touch on some of the workflows that are also enabled by, it's an extension of that question around work sharing, but some of the workflows that are enabled by hosting your model in BIM 360 as opposed to your server. The first is when you host your model in BIM 360, you get access to a panel inside Revit that is around collaboration. And there's some published settings in there. And if you've not seen it or used it before, basically what those published settings enable you to do is create sets. And the set is basically either a view of the model or multiple views. It could be schedules, could be drawings, individual sheets, and you call that a set. And you basically say for the set, give it a name, level 1. You can say in level 1, all I want to show is the ground floor plan, hide all the furniture because I don't want to show that, and I want to show a 3D view. And then that becomes your set, and then you can just publish that and put it into a shared folder inside BIM 360 and share that with other people. That really means that you don't need to create copies of that model or try and create clones that you clean up just to be able to publish that limited view of data. So you're not duplicating the Revit model. You're not having to create any additional workflows to support that. And because you're publishing a Revit view and a Revit sheet, you can publish those in the native formats without having to produce a PDF, which also reduces that administration. And then the people who are receiving that, if they're just viewing it in the browser, will be able to see both the Revit view and the sheet, the Revit sheet, just using a browser. So it does really kind of streamline some of those workflows. So I've just got a question here from Jason that's come in. So what's the process of putting existing workshared models in BIM 360? Is it just using the collaboration from the existing central model? Yeah, so any work sharing that you set up on your Revit model is retained when you publish that model to the cloud. There is a process of doing that, but the very important thing is you need to first set up the BIM 360 environment, make sure you've enabled design collaboration, make sure those people that your design teams have access and you've set them up in the environment, and that their folder structure is in place to support that. Once that's in place, there's a few other things, permissions and various other bits that you need to consider. But once that's in place, then you can, as the administrator, you can publish that central model from Revit and save it directly into the chosen folder. And then providing your team has access to that, because you will have set them up that way, they'll be able to continue with that work shared environment. So it's not the behavior of the model isn't changing, it's just the location.
There's a question just come in here, Cole, about limitations of using the VPN and remote desktop. I'll pick that one up if you want.
Yeah.
So yeah, there are some limitations with using remote desktop, and that is down to the graphics. Several applications, for example, Enscape, won't support remote desktop protocol. I guess for me, the biggest risk of using a VPN and remote desktop back to the office is we're currently in what we call a partial lockdown by the government. Now, in central London, there may come a time where we're in full lockdown and we can't actually get access to the office. Now, if we've got, say, 50 Revit users VPNing into head office, running the application over the VPN using remote desktop, what happens if there's a power outage and those workstations were to become turned off? How would we get back in to turn those back on? So there's some of the risks involved with VPN and remote desktop. So just to consider that as the government may move to that full lockdown, what are you going to put in place for access to the workstations in the event of that happening? The other question we've got here about security of VPN and home user devices. Again, we wouldn't recommend installing a VPN, a corporate VPN, onto a home user device. The reason for that is risk. If you don't have the correct level of protection on the home user, as soon as you open up the VPN connection to the head office, you're exposing your corporate network. So again, best practices is don't install the VPN locally, or if you do have to, is restrict the traffic of where that client VPN can go to. Got some more questions, Carl, coming in.
Yeah,
So there's a quick one. I'll jump in on one here. So how does a remote user download Revit 2018? A couple of options for you here, providing that's within your entitlement. For your users on a multi-user basis, obviously you don't assign the license in a common manner. I've just shared a link in the chat box for everyone. This is to Autodesk Ask Ava system. She will provide, it's basically a virtual agent, but she'll provide any download links that are required or any details for any of that thing, including patches. There's also a host of details on the Autodesk Knowledge Network. I've just shared a link there to the product downloads as well. With Autodesk downloads, whenever you download an Autodesk product, it'll ask the user for a sign-in. It essentially runs a trial until it's authenticated, until you set up the license. So when your users download it, it'll be asked, what am I? Am I a single user or am I a multi-user license? You need to share with your users the server details, and they'll be able to access it from home. So you will need to send them that information if they don't have it accessible. But the actual download files can be found there. Yeah, either via the Ask Ava, the Autodesk Virtual Agent, or indeed the Autodesk Knowledge Network. You'll get access to all the download links you require.
Right.
While I'm on that,
while
I'm on that trader thought, just a common question, especially at this time. Many of you would have heard that the AutoCAD 2021 version was released yesterday. So we are into the annual release cycle of the new Autodesk versions. Now, with all that's going on, it's a different release schedule. Well, it's a different release schedule this year. But often get asked, should we be upgrading immediately? Do we have to upgrade immediately? Short answer is no. You do not need to jump into the latest version in this sort of time frame and what's everything that's going on. Probably advise against it right now. Features on the new versions, some really good stuff happening. But at this moment, business continuity is the key. So I'd always recommend ensuring is it worth upgrading right now? You can make a decision yourselves. But your previous version entitlement will permit you to keep using the older versions you've already got installed, already accessing. So no need to jump to the 2021 version immediately. You're on our YouTube channel now. We've got some feature videos up already, so you can have a look at what's new. But keynote is probably best to try and keep the continuity of the business working and what everyone's doing rather than looking to upgrade right now. You can upgrade whenever, and Autodesk will be cycling through and notifying contract managers of the release schedule as it gets fulfilled on your contract.
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, guys, please keep asking questions. We're here for for you, just to kind of put any doubts, fears, concerns to rest, or potentially challenge us with your scenario and what you're trying to get set up. I just wanted to touch on what Alan mentioned earlier about remote desktop. There are some limitations with some software not actually being able to work in that way. And Alan, perhaps you can talk to that after this quick kind of review of that that sort of process. But we've seen quite a few of our customers that have actually shipped their machines home for their users. So that's a way to kind of circumnavigate that before the lockdown. But if we do move into a lockdown, as Alan pointed out earlier, we're going to run into a scenario where those machines, you're not going to be able to access them if they get shut down. But also your users are going to have not the most productive experience on that. As bandwidth start to slow down and service providers start to throttle that, because they do that where they manage the throttling. So potentially there's going to be a challenge where you may have users at home that can't access the machines at work. So I would consider looking at that as the next phase. Is how do we then, anyone who's got a VPN and using that to remote desktop control a machine in the office, is what's our plan B? What's our next phase? Please consider that, so that you're not caught short where you now no longer can access the office, but equally you then have to come up with another plan to support your users and enable them from home. So Alan, if you could talk to some of the limitations around some software that just won't work in that way, and perhaps answer how we can get around it.
Yeah, and you're right in what you're saying there, Carl. At some point we may have to consider that moving the workstations from the office to the home users' addresses. Now, the issue with that, if I stay on that point at the moment, is it will have to be planned, because we'll get to a point where we have to move them all. We can't partially move some because of where the data is. Now, if at the moment, if the decision is everyone is using a VPN and remote desktop to the office workstations, we can't just start to move some of those users out, because the data in for example, with Revit has to be next to the workstation on a LAN environment. If we take some users' machines back to their head office, they're using the Revit at the home address, connecting to data over a VPN. So it becomes, we have to move the data from A to B, the workstation from B to A, and have the BIM 360 going up as a replacement service. So just to consider that, if you are thinking of moving some of the home users' workstations back to their home addresses, just be careful about where the data resides, because you can't then use the Revit across the VPN connection, because like someone's mentioned in the chat, they experience poor performance accessing that data across the VPN. Limitations, like stated earlier, there are applications which won't support the remote desktop protocol from a graphics user interface, Enscape being one, the OpenGL protocol. If you do require that, there are alternative pieces of software out there, different protocols to connect to the workstation. HP do a remote graphics software, Dell do Teradici. You can look at some of those software solutions in addition to the VPN connection. I guess the biggest challenge will be bandwidth. Bandwidth is, as Cole stated, they are starting to restrict bandwidth. We're seeing the major Netflix, etc., restricting their service. And at some point, when we all become working from home, bandwidth will be an issue for a lot of people, especially if you live in a built-up area and you're accessing a VPN. Potentially, you're going to have a contended ratio of, say, 50 users to 1, and that will be an issue, running software across the VPN or running services across the VPN. There's a question there, Cole, about BIM 360 just coming in.
Yeah.
About from design trial to hubs. So do you want to pick that one up?
Yeah, so basically the question is, they have an existing BIM 360 docs environment, sign up for a trial of design, so trying to enable that Revit work sharing. They sort of had some issues with user switching between hubs, and should they deactivate one to enable the other? No, you shouldn't have to deactivate any to enable anything else. So a design trial should enable you to connect to your existing hub. The thing you would need to make sure is that you've enabled that as a service on your existing BIM 360 environment. The challenge you've got with, if you're running BIM 360 docs, but you've enabled a BIM 360 design trial, your docs environment is not going to be enabled for a design collaboration, so it's not going to have that functionality and capability. So what you would, in this case, what you would need to do is use the design environment and host the project models on there. So it's, I think, as Andrew Anagnos said from Autodesk, it's not going to be perhaps the best experience, but that's going to be your option. If you have a BIM 360 design commercial environment, and then you set users up in BIM 360 design on a trial, then they would be able to access that, because your BIM 360 tenant hub site, the technical term is tenant, will have had that functionality enabled. So you shouldn't have to deactivate any users. They should be able to access multiple projects. Equally, there is a question around, at the end of the trial, would they need to do anything to make sure that you don't automatically get charged? That's not going to happen. Basically, at the end of May, so 31st of May, if you've chosen not to extend that commercially, basically it'll just stop working. You won't get charged. Word of advice is obviously just make sure you download all your data beforehand. So yeah, the deadline is the end of May, 31st of May. Just make sure, if you're not going to continue with that, you just download the data and then carry on working as you would have done locally. So that's hopefully that answers that. I just want to touch on a question that came in around someone who signed up for a collaboration for Revit trial many years ago. Unfortunately, the way that Autodesk trial management software works is if your email address has been used, you're not going to be able to sign up for another trial. So recommend someone else in your organization signs up for that trial, activates that hub, and then invites that user into that environment. So that would be the way around it. I would strongly suggest that you don't use a temporary email address to create another trial. The reason for that is, to touch on Billy's point earlier, your Autodesk software is assigned to a named user. And if you're using Revit as the platform that you use, you're signed in already to Revit using your work email address and your Autodesk ID. So if you're trying to upload a file to BIM 360, it's looking at that ID, not this temporary email address that you've created. So just be aware of that. That you make sure that you're using, your kind of official work email addresses and try and avoid any temporary ones. There's lots of workarounds for that, but just again, word of caution, you want to try and make this process as painless as possible. Alan, there's a question there on VPN.
Yeah, I'll pick that one up, Cole. So we're using VPN, but not using remote desktop. If the server lost power, would it reboot? If the server lost power, there was a power outage, then normally the server would be connected to a UPS. The UPS would maintain power to the server for a period of time. If then the UPS had to shut down the server because there was no power resumed, then yes, the server would need to be then physically turned on once main power was restored. So just bear that in mind. If there is a power cut, the UPS then shuts down the server, you're going to have to go back into the office to potentially turn that server back on. If the server was to crash, then there are settings where we can make sure and ensure that reboots on failure. And David, I'll pick that up with one of the team and get them to give you a call on that one. While I'm here, Cole, there's a question about virtual GPUs. What is the benefit of BIM 360 design? Okay, yes, you can host Revit in data centers using the virtual GPU. The benefit of that is, again, you're just using a connection into the data center to run that desktop as a service. The limitations at the moment with desktop as a service offerings are what is available today. I know a lot of the private data centers are running out of capacity within their data centers in terms of compute and GPU. So we are limited there. Even some of the public cloud offering now are starting to see a load and starting to put some restrictions on running desktop as a service. It's definitely an option. I think it's definitely where we will see a lot of people after this event moving and looking at those for a DR perspective, running desktop as a server in a data center with virtual GPUs. At the moment, it's not a solution we can just quickly implement for you, because there's a number of factors in there where your data is, what have we got to run, utility service, etc., next to those desktops. But definitely an option, something, Jason, we can pick up with you offline and look at some of the options for you.
I think Jason asked another question about cost as well. BIM 360 licenses. So this could work out more expensive over a longer period. I guess that's more expensive than VPN, perhaps, or a data center. Yeah, look, cost is always going to be a factor, and definitely something that you need to build into any model. I know right now, it's just how do I get people working and how do we get our projects delivered and continue to deliver against our company's commitments. So that's, step number one. The BIM 360 as a platform is really around enabling more advanced workflows than just working from home. It's definitely a solution for that. But to touch on something I mentioned earlier, if you're using the platform in the right way, which is a slightly different way to how you would work locally, that should start to avoid all the administrational tasks like having to produce PDFs, because you can view native files. Design review processes, which typically require you to produce PDFs so other people can mark them up and send them back, where you're creating multiple files to send to multiple people. That sort of process is all managed within BIM 360, so that you've got a central area where all of your project stakeholders are connected. They can review content. They're always looking at the latest content. They can add any comments to that data. They can raise issues if they spot it, and they can assign those, and we can track those through to resolution. So it's enabling kind of a broader sense of kind of workflows that would otherwise be quite manual or administrative in a traditional sense. So I think when you're looking at cost, if you take BIM 360 Design as a single user, you're paying about £75 a month if you take an annual license. That's what the monthly cost is. So you do need to factor that in. And right now, I know I was talking to a client earlier. I said, cost is not an issue. Well, I beg to differ. It is a bit. We do need to be a little bit sensitive to that. But also what you've got to look at is, where do you want this to go, and how long do we need this enabled for, and what's the outcome? So if you're going to run a trial of BIM 360, bear that cost in mind. It's around £40 a user. If you're just buying single licenses, the prices do decrease if you buy more. But it's around £40 a user a month based on an annual license, and with design it's £75 a month based on an annual license for that. So that's, if you decide to continue it, that's what you're looking at. But again, the point of the next 2 months is to look at how these workflows can enable you to work more effectively in a virtual environment. And that hopefully starts to offset some of the other processes that would otherwise take more time to achieve, that offsets any cost that you'd be spending on BIM 360.
Yep.
Just had another question about, can we install Revit on a virtual machine? You can. Quick note on that though, licensing perspective from Autodesk, single user basis permitted, multi-user basis unfortunately not. So many of you know that the multi-user license from Autodesk is set to expire, and we're transitioning now into a named user basis. I've shared a link as well which outlines the rights for virtualizing software. You can virtualize the network license server, but you can't on a multi-user basis. You cannot actually virtualize the software itself. Single user, yes. Multi-user, no. So this is where some of the other solutions noted that home use licensing for multi-user would be a key one for you, or indeed checking out the license for an extended period of time, accessing via VPN, checking out, as noted at the beginning of this session. VPN connections can be frustrating, so best to look at your options and look at the best route for you.
Okay.
So I'll pick up on a question that I've had before. Is are there any restrictions in terms of number of users, number of projects, storage on BIM 360? Right now, there's no storage limit. There isn't on a trial, and there isn't on a commercial. So there is no storage limit. There is no limit on the number of projects you can set up now in the trial. There used to be a single project limit, but in this current trial, they've removed any of those restrictions. The only limit is you can have 250 users, or up to 250 users per project. So that's not just your team, but also the extended team. So fairly generous, I think, in terms of that. I don't think many people will exceed that, but that's the current limitation is around 250 users. So just answer that question.
We've got a question for you on that, Carl, which is coming via email. Where's the data located from the Autodesk BIM 360 platform on this free trial?
Yeah, very good question. So if you purchase BIM 360, you get the option to choose which server you want it to be on, is either EU or the US. But this trial, if you're running a trial, it's only available on the US server. So your data will be on a US server. But having said that, it is encrypted. They are governed by the Privacy Shield agreement, which is an agreement between basically the EU and the US, where the data is controlled where it's sourced. So the laws apply at that where it was originated, should I say. So your data is pretty protected. The data is hosted on an Amazon web server. So what that means is if my data originates, if I save it through this trial on the US server, if I'm accessing it in the UK, basically what the Amazon web server does is it caches that to the server as close to me as possible. So local to me. In that case, it would be in Dublin. So it just caches it to the local place that I am, so that speeds up the access. But otherwise, it's for this trial, the data is hosted on the US server.
And before we jump into the next question, just been informed that some of the links I've shared aren't going through correctly on the chat box. So I'll post all the links on the description of the recording of this video. So if you check back once the recording's up, all the links will be available to the downloads, to the network licensing policy, etc. So we'll add those. Sorry, Carl, I think it's another one for you on the BIM 360 platform again.
Yeah, no worries. We can also post the links to the blogs or anything like that, so that they've got a central resource for all of this information. So when it comes to upskilling users on BIM 360 design platform, what resources are available to help get our users up and running to be able to make the best use of the trial period? So yeah, very good question. There are, unfortunately, probably far too much information out on the web, covering everything from collaboration forever right through to what's currently available today. So there's, if you've got the time and the kind of resources to have a look at all the information that's out there, follow the Autodesk links. There is a lot of information available, but what I will say with that is some of them are not necessarily showing you what the way that you would be working in a project might differ to a company next to you. But also there are probably about 4 or 5 ways you can set up your folder sharing if you're collaborating with people outside of your organization. That starts to be quite interesting in terms of how you set up your projects so that you can collaborate effectively. For example, you may be outsourcing some of your project design work where they're either working directly on your live Revit model, your work shared model. So that's one option. You need to be able to manage that. Or potentially they're working on a model that you've referenced into your work shared model. So either way, you've got a scenario where an external party is collaborating in your environment. You need to be able to structure it accordingly. When you're sharing your data, let's say you're an architectural practice and you're working with other disciplines, well, you should really think about, well, how are you going to collaborate in that space? Because the current methods of transferring data, WeTransfer or other methods, typically require you to save the data on your server in a particular folder. Well, we're now working in a BIM 360 environment. So we really need to come up with a slightly different workflow for that to make sure that that works really well and is controlled. And that's where BIM 360 design really comes into its own, because it is around design collaboration. So if you publish data for those other disciplines, they get notified. They have that data already linked into their project. So when they accept that and they say, yes, I want you to use this latest information, it automatically updates the file that's already linked into their environment, and that workflow is quite seamless. But you've got to set that up. You've got to make sure you take the time to set that up. We have got, I mean, this is not, the point of this was really to answer any questions. Please reach out to us. We do have services available that will help with that. We try to make them, this is not how we get it all set up and all bells and whistles. I think that's a luxury that many of us can't afford at this stage. So what we're looking to do is go, how do we get you up and running with the bare essentials just to kickstart your usage of BIM 360 in the best possible way? So we've got experts that can help with that. They know what they're doing. They can get you set up really, really quickly. Reach out to some, your contacts at Excitech, and they'll talk you through some options that we've got available. So yeah, definitely do that. But like I said, there's lots of options. So it's really is it just your internal team? Are they working across multiple projects? What is the workflow that you currently have? And then potentially, how does that look different in a BIM 360 world where some of those processes can be streamlined, let's say, or perhaps just eliminated altogether? So yeah, to make best use of the trial, I think just have a chat with one of us first. Let's see what you're trying to do. Let's see how you're trying to get that set up, and then we can give you the best advice. So yeah, that's has any other questions come in whilst I was talking to that? Nothing at the moment. Okay, I'm going to jump on to the what happens at the end of that trial. I know I touched on it earlier, but yeah, come the 31st of May, the BIM 360 trial that you're running will stop. Autodesk may decide to extend that. That's what the wording is in their when they publish this announcement, that they will take a decision close to the time. If they don't, please, just set a reminder. You need to make sure that you download your data from that from that portal so that it's available to your team locally. You need to factor that in. Bear in mind that if you've got, 100 gig of data in there, it's going to take some time to download. We can't predict what's going to happen in 2 months' time with service providers. So just make sure you're building that in. If you do decide to go commercial and you want to purchase licenses for BIM 360, again, just factor that in because you're going to need to allow time to transition over to a paid-for site. So just bear that in mind. Don't wait until the 30th. Do that on the 15th or something so that you've got a bit of a buffer because this was made available to the whole world. So come the end of May, it might be a little bit of a he who gets there first wins scenario. And I just want you to kind of just think about that closer to the time so that you're not in a situation where you're no longer able to work, because that won't give you a really good experience. So just bear that in mind. I had another question come through around the redlining and markups and issues. Because BIM 360 enables you to view a Revit sheet and you can do markups on that and then raise issues and assign those to other people, and it has this whole ecosystem where you can start to create additional data on top of the drawings that are there and the models that are there. So people are saying, well, what happens when I download my data at the end of this trial? Do I still get all those markups and the issues and that legacy? It's not going to be transferred with your with the data that you download, because it's a function of BIM 360. So because it's a function of BIM 360, it's coordinated with that sheet and with that model. But when you download it, you're just going to get the data that you put up there. So just bear that in mind. There are ways you can export like CSV data and all of that, but it's not going to capture the redlining. So just please bear that in mind. It's anything you download is you're just going to get your data back. Let's say that's the important thing, but it will be the latest version, and it will be current. So yeah, just definitely bear that in mind. So another question, when it comes to upskilling users on BIM 360, oh no, that was the previous one, sorry. Is there a way to keep a copy of the file stored in BIM 360 Design offline at regular intervals? Yeah, absolutely. So bear in mind, if I put a Revit model into BIM 360 and then I work on it and I save it back to BIM 360 again, and that regular process of me editing the model and saving it back to BIM 360, every time I do that, BIM 360 is creating a backup for me. So the version that was there that I opened is, let's say it's version 1. When I edit it and save it back, it just makes the new version 2. Now, it doesn't change the name, doesn't change anything of the file. Basically, it's just creating a series of backups for me. And this is any data that I copy that is the same file. It could be a PDF called Fred, and I drag it and drop it in there. If I edit Fred and drag it and drop it back in there, it's just going to say this is a second version of Fred. And I can compare the two PDFs. And that's the same with a Revit model or an IFC or a PDF or a Revit sheet. So you're creating, every time you save, it's creating these backups for you. So it's automatically storing multiple versions of your file. And the reason it's doing that is so that at any point you can compare what's changed between the current version and any of the previous versions. And that's a Revit model or an IFC or a PDF or a sheet where you can compare what's changed in those models. So when you download, if you're going to create another backup of that and you download it, you're only downloading the very latest version, which is absolutely fine, and you can do that. So you can create what Jason's saying about offline versions at regular intervals. Just download the current version of the model. Bear in mind that BIM 360 is keeping all of these backups for you anyway, and there is no storage limit with BIM 360, so you're not going to have any impact with that. But one of the key things to think about that is if you're doing that to do a backup in your server, and you're then backing up your server onto a tape, which then needs to go off-site, you've got no one that's going to be allowed in your office. So just consider that as a potential risk if you're using tape backup. So it's okay if you're backing up to the cloud again, but if if someone physically has to go in and remove something from the server on site, there are potential drawbacks there with that. So it is safe on BIM 360 at least until the end of May.
Just while we're on the file stored in BIM 360, Carl, yeah. Can we? The questions come in there. Can we store all non-Autodesk file types as well? Yes,
there's a list of supported file formats that you can interact with. So it'll view around 60 different CAD formats. So Inventor files, or it'll view all of those files. And it'll interact with a number of other files, so Office files and the like. For example, you won't be able to upload like an executable to it. There has some restrictions in terms of what file formats it'll support. But it can host big files. The infrastructure team use it for hosting laser surveys and massive point cloud data. So you can use it for that. And most of those formats are supported in terms of being able to view them from a browser. So yes, you can, but there are some file formats that just are not supported in BIM 360. On that note, if you're using Office 365, BIM 360 is integrated with 365. So if you're editing any documents which are hosted in BIM 360, typically things like spreadsheets linked to your Revit model, if you update the sheet, you can do that directly from BIM 360 and save it. And it's using the 365 engine to do that, and that will update your sheet, give it a new version, and it keeps track of that as well. So yes, you can view a number of different file formats just in the browser. So What other questions do we have?
Well, a common note, or just something that I'd throw out there as well. So, keynote for all Autodesk subscribers, or for AutoCAD subscribers at least. As part of your subscriptions, you'll have access to 2 useful tools at this time. Again, moving slightly away from Revit just for a moment, but on the AutoCAD, including specialized tool sets, you'll have access to 2 services, one being Autodesk Web, so basically you can access AutoCAD via a web browser, and the second being AutoCAD mobile app. Now, this doesn't link to BIM 360 at this stage, but it links to a sort of dead storage Autodesk A360. But essentially, you'll be able to access the AutoCAD licenses in different ways. They're not ideal. Designing on AutoCAD and a mobile app, I found it quite difficult, but be aware that it is an option for you, as is the web-based version. So to access those, or to ensure your users have access to it, simple way, just when you assign the license, you can assign the license desktop access, it's called. But as you look below, you'll see a couple of options, web and mobile. So if you just assign your single user and multi-user licenses that way, just gives a bit of flexibility at these times to sort of access your products and make sure you can be as productive as possible.
It was just, I've got one question coming by email, Carl, slightly off topic. Procurement of high-end mobile workstations, delivery times at the moment, is that affected? Yes, so your high-end mobile workstations from Dell and HP, there is, just to set your expectations, there is very limited stock in the country at the moment. Most of those type of devices are what we say built to order, normally on a 2-week lead time. We are seeing the lead time of those extended to approximately 3 to 4 weeks from Dell and HP at the moment. But there is, like I say, there is some stock left in the UK. If you do need some mobile workstations to support your remote user, reach out to your account manager and they'll be able to let you know what's available in the UK at the moment. And there's one other question as well. We have Microsoft Office 365. Can we use Teams? Yes, with your 365 subscription, you do have Microsoft Teams. The entry level to Teams is included as part of your 365 suite. It's enabled by default. If you download the Teams application on your local device, you will be able to use the Teams platform. With that, it integrates obviously OneDrive, SharePoint, and Skype for Business. Again, if you need any help with that, please reach out to our support team and we'll be able to assist.
And another question from Jason here. How many home use licenses can we request? You can request home use license for each multi-user license you have. Your usage shouldn't exceed 30 at any given moment if that's your current seat count. But you can request one for each license. You can do it via your Autodesk account. Any issues, just contact us and we'll try and support you.
Guys, I'm conscious that we're coming up to the top of the hour, so we don't want to take any more time than absolutely necessary. If you think this is a good idea and we should run more of these, please give us some ideas on topics or things that you would like us to cover. Obviously, the team is bigger than the 3 of us. We've got a much bigger team behind us as well. So hopefully this has been useful. This has been recorded, so we will make it live. Please feel free to share it with anyone you think will be useful for. And again, if you have any comments underneath the video, we'll respond to those as well. So yeah, please, we're here to support you. This is a really challenging time for us, as it is for you. And we just want to make sure that however we can help you, we do whatever we can to enable you to have as much information at your disposal that will kind of set you on the right path, so that you're considering where you want to take this in the future and the best path for you to get to where you need to be. So again, thank you for all your comments. Again, hopefully this was useful. If I can thank Billy and Alan for their time as well. Really been useful for us, and thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks. Again, thanks for participating. Stay safe.